Welcome to Government Contracting Weekly, sponsored by AOC Key Solutions Incorporated. Government Contracting Weekly is the only television program devoted exclusively to the competitive and dynamic world of government contracting. A world where coming in second place is not an option, but where principle-centered winning is the only approach.
Good morning and welcome to Government Contracting Weekly. I'm Jim McCarthy, the owner of Key Solutions and the host of this show. In the summer of 2013, I had the opportunity to sit down with Joe Jordan, then the Administrator, Office of Federal Procurement Policy of OMB, in what became a two-part interview on Government Contracting Weekly. Today, I once again have the pleasure of sitting down with Joe, who has since rejoined private industry as the President of the Public Sector for FedBid. In today's conversation, we will once again get to hear Joe's perspective of government contracting community, as well as learn about his new responsibilities at FedBid. Good morning, Joe, and welcome back to Government Contracting Weekly, sir.
Thanks, Jim. Okay. It's great to be back here.
Okay, so when I was a kid, my mom would never let me grow up to be a cowboy, okay? So my question for you is, did your mother warn you against growing up to be the head of OFPP?
No, it was amazing. I don't know, for some reason, growing up in a small town in Massachusetts, all my friends wanted to be, firefighters and astronauts, and I just wanted to be a contracting officer.
I thought everybody did.
Yeah, no, I've lived my dream thus far, and the adventure continues.
Well, that's really good because you've been on both sides of now the government and industry. I guess the question I would ask right now is, you sat atop a massive organization that is responsible for some $530 billion. Some people would say that's the pinnacle of one's success, and yet you're trying something different and new. Why? Why are you doing that?
Well, first of all, the job at OFPP was just an incredible honor and privilege. I had a great time working with a team, not just the OMB team, but all the agencies as well, on, as you alluded to, some monumental challenges and opportunities to improve the way the government buys. I went into that job thinking that it would be a few-year service opportunity, having come from the SBA. When I went into the SBA, I signed up for, okay, I'm going to join the administration for 18 months, and 5 years later, when I was looking to potentially transition out of OFPP, my wife and I, in the intervening time, had 2 young kids, and it was time for me to start thinking about college educations and things like that. So seemed like the right opportunity to transition back to the private sector. And the opportunity with FedBid kind of came out of nowhere, where I was introduced to Ted Leonsis, who's on the board at FedBid through a mutual friend, and he said, hey, we're looking for someone to run the government operations there. And I had seen kind of the innovative impact that reverse auctions, when used appropriately, could have, and so it just seemed like the right fit.
And we'll come back to a little bit about FedBid in a second. Let me ask you a little question in terms of your tenure as the OFPP chief. What would you say were the major challenges that you faced when you were in that position?
There's just a consistent challenge, which is when you've got, as you said, about $500 billion in federal spending to go out through government contracts every year, something on the order of 15 million actions, managing that, setting policies and procedures through which those dollars can be spent most wisely is a challenge. Now, during my period at OFPP, we had some exogenous shocks that caused even more of a challenge with shutdowns and furloughs and all of those sorts of things. But I feel like you can't complain about any particular event, and you just manage within, and I'm really proud of what we were able to accomplish.
Would you say you presided over really tough times? I mean, was it hard?
Look, it's government contracting, it's not fighting a war, and so I had colleagues at other agencies with very tough jobs. Do I think in the federal acquisition arena I presided over some tough times? Sure. But again, I think that through a collaborative effort, government, industry, agency personnel, we were able to navigate those tough times pretty successfully.
Let's talk about the state of the union, so to speak. Do you feel that you left your post with government contracting community in a better position than when you took over?
I do, and that's not because of me, that's because of collaborative effort by folks across and throughout the community. But when you look at the level of contracting officers, the number of 1102s in our workforce, the training that we're getting them, and the way that we're standardizing and measuring that. The view of the acquisition workforce as everyone from program and project managers through contracting officers to contracting officers, representatives on the back end, and that taking that holistic view, as well as injecting some more metrics-based management and hopefully a little bit more of a risk-taking tolerance. I think we are, and I got to be honest with you, Jim, I left far more optimistic and continue to be as optimistic now as I've ever been about the state of our acquisition workforce and our acquisition system.
When you started early, when did it dawn on you the enormous, massive challenges that this particular position entails? When did that happen?
I had the great fortune to have had a job at SBA where I worked with the previous administrator, Dan Gordon, quite a bit, and the whole OFPP team. And it's more of a SWAT team of 20 people. There's not, cast of thousands there. And so I had seen firsthand how hard they work, how dedicated they are, but the scope of the challenges. So I was a little bit more eyes wide open than if I'd just come in from the outside. But I would say right after I was nominated and the word was out, all of the calls and emails and the 2 cents of advice that I would get from everyone really made me understand not just the scope and the magnitude of the challenge, but how in every individual decision there were going to be close to 50-50 calls.
Let's imagine that there's somewhere in the White House there's this Hall of Fame and there's a bust for all the former OFPP administrators, including yourself. What would your plaque say?
Well, that's a tough one, and I by no means presume to be in any hall with a yellow jacket or otherwise, but I will say that the thing I'm probably most proud of is that when I went before the Senate during my confirmation process and talked to the community about what I was going to try to accomplish, I said, I want to decrease our level of spending. We've got to buy smarter. And I said, we're going to do that while also increasing the percentage of the dollars that go to small and disadvantaged business, because I believe that those two things could happen at once.
You're a strong advocate of that.
Yeah, and you look, we had last year the largest decrease in government contracting spending in history, and simultaneously it looks like for the first time in history, given all the current methodologies, we hit the small business contracting goal. So that's pretty good.
So that's maybe what your bust would say, at least in that Hall of Fame.
I can't believe how much gray hair that bust might have, though.
One final question before we go to break. Is basically, have we seen the worst? Is the economic downturn for government contracting over, or might the other shoe still drop?
Well, I do think we're probably in a new normal. We're not going to reach the lofty heights of kind of the later 2000s, part of the first decade of 2000s, with the war spending drawdown and things of that nature. But I do hope that the real big shocks about shutdowns or having a completely broken budget process are in large part behind us. Could it still happen? Unfortunately, yes. But I also think that we've now, as a community, learned how to successfully navigate through those waters, and therefore,
so hopefully the
I think
second time it won't be as bad when we face it.
Hopefully there's no second time, but yes, if so, I feel like it won't be as bad.
Okay, well, we're going to pause now and take a break. When we come back, what we want to talk about, Joe, is a little bit about your track record and then also kind of look into the future, okay?
Absolutely.
All right.
So did we win that government contract?
We did.
And?
And now we've got to deal with the regulatory hurdles.
Well, good luck with that.
When the government's your client, you need to play by their rules.
And the rules change more than you think.
Exactly. We need someone who's done this before. Plus, it's complicated, so we're going with BDO.
BDO?
People who know government contracting know BDO.
AFCEA has been bringing government and industry together since 1946. By joining AFCEA, you'll reach the decision makers and become part of the discussion. You'll increase market visibility, gain market insight, receive discounts on AFCEA member services and events, and manage and engage corporate associates. AFCEA is the association of choice. Join today at www.afcea.org.
Let's get back to the question of your impact and your accomplishments. Did you have an impact? Did you feel like you had an impact during your tenure, and in what area?
I feel like, we as the OFPP team and broader the acquisition workforce within the government had a tremendous impact over the last few years. I don't know or really care to think about what piece of that was my personal impact, but when you look at the fact that we had sequester and shutdown and morale impacts of furloughing some of our contracting workforce, all of these types of things going on during a year in which we reduced spending, both because of budgetary reasons, but also through buying smarter, and increased our small business utilization, increased competition, reduced high-risk contracting, all of those sorts of things. I think that we did have an impact.
Give me your one thing you feel best about during your time. One thing.
Honestly, I think it might be managing the shutdown. I was able to, along with the OMB team, co-lead the management of that, and to the extent we could, minimize some of the pains and the long-term effects of that.
Now, Joe, you occur to me to be a person of action. You're in motion constantly. Did you feel constrained in any way by the bureaucracy, and were you buried in red tape, and any way you turned, there was somebody saying, no, you can't do that?
That might be a better question for my 2017 appearance on Government Contracting Weekly. Look, I will say that the FAR in the regulatory environment that gets a lot of heat was not a barrier to smart contracting. I relied very much on the Part 1 phrase of it's not forbidden, expressly prohibited in this book, in comports with sound business judgment, you can do it. That was my operating mantra. But, when you're dealing in such a strict oversight culture, in a highly politicized environment, even though smart contracting shouldn't have any political overtones, occasionally it does. Sure, there were some degrees of freedom I may not have had that I would have liked.
Okay, well, because I was thinking back, I know I'm going way back to World War II, but let's go back to the 60s in NASA and the space program and all that. You didn't hear of this adversarial relationship between government, and it seemed smoother. What's your reaction to that?
I think you're right. And one of the things that has been really re-emphasized to me over the last 6 months I've been in the private sector is the way in which you can change that, when you can change that attitude to be a trust-based collaborative relationship between industry and government. That's where you see the outsized positive impacts. I don't know exactly why that was before, that we're all on the same team attitude, but...
Are things getting better or worse?
I think they're getting better. I think they are getting better. Now, I'm a bit of an optimist in general, but when I look at the tenor of hearings, the tone of agency policies, things like OMB just came out with the tech FAR, trying to use the existing structure and communicate it in a way that says, hey, we're open to this engagement. It doesn't mean that industry has free reign, but it does mean that we want to collaborate.
Dust off your crystal ball for just a second. Crystal ball, not your bowl. And what's in the future? What do you see as the next big hot ticket item for our government contracting market?
Well, I don't want to get ahead of anything that my successor, Ann Rung, might want to do, or the president of the OMB team might be thinking. I obviously haven't been involved in that quite some time, but I think the direction that you'll see things go are combining one, there have been a lot of executive orders and policies coming out, making sure that we're buying from the right sorts of contractors. So, and I can see that sort of continuing. And then second, how do we shore up the buying smarter strategies and the use of metrics and data, especially in the IT arena, which is about $80 billion.
$80 billion, yeah. Has it ever been a concern to you about the consolidations that are going on, that the ultimate game plan might very well be there's just a few pockets of contractors, an oligarchy, I guess is a word that one would use. Has that ever been a concern, the industrial base? How do you react to these acquisitions and mergers and so on?
Yeah, it's absolutely
is it
an issue to watch. I think, I would defer to Frank Kendall, who I had the pleasure of working quite a bit with and is a really smart guy and meets with kind of the big five or so, as he said, monthly, and then a lot of other contractors periodically. And I think things have really changed from the days of the Last Supper, where it was, okay, you guys are going to merge because that's how we want to interact with industry, to now, okay, no more large-scale mergers because we don't want
so there may be a break put on that at some point.
Yeah, I mean, there will always be strategic acquisitions and divestitures and things of that nature, but I think that we've got to be thoughtful in the way we manage the industrial base when we're in a period of declining contract spending, not increasing.
What would be your one piece of advice to your successor, Ann Rung? what do you think you would tell her if you had a chance to sit down with her?
I would say find some things outside of the office that give you a moment of zen and focus on those during some of the heavy days. No, but she is such a smart, talented, and good person that I am very confident she'll do great things and doesn't need much advice from a guy like me.
She'll have her hands full, though.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it is a challenge. But
okay.
fun.
Well, again, we're going to step away for a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk about FedBid and what that's all about for our viewers. Okay? Thank you.
What do you want for your business? If you're a federal contractor, your likely answer is to win. But winning these days is harder to do as the market has become increasingly competitive and demands that you do much more with much less. Hi, I'm Lauren LaMarche, a certified professional coach and proposal manager. At KSI, we believe your key to winning lies in developing your proposal team. Integrating our leadership coaching services into your existing proposal process can help you create a winning team that will give you a competitive edge and increase your win probability. For 30 years, we've helped the top 10 federal contractors and hundreds of smaller firms win over $130 billion in federal business. So, do you really want to win? If your answer is yes, then invest in your people. You can't afford not to. Contact me at ksileadershipcoaching.com because you need to win.
Okay, welcome back. I'm here with Joe Jordan. What is FedBid, Joe?
FedBid is an online marketplace where agencies can post buys for commodity items, simple services, and sellers can compete through a reverse auction that allows for dynamic bidding. Agencies save usually 10 to 15% on average. Small businesses win about 80% of the awards, and it can really be a successful administrative cost reduction as well as an outsized benefit for agencies and sellers.
Okay. How's, now that you're president of FedBid, how does that differ from when you were the OFPP Administrator? Tell us about the differences in culture, expectations, and whatever.
Yeah, and there's no doubt it's been a transition, and I had spent my whole career in the private sector before joining the Obama administration, brought in that viewpoint and tried to improve the operations of government from the inside, and then now transitioning to FedBid, still trying to help the government, but from the industry perspective. And I would say the nice change is the rational success criteria. It's now more of, are we growing the business and are our customers happy, versus before it was a little bit of kind of, what does Congress think I'm doing and are they happy about that, and a little bit more opaque. And so I like that, but I miss a lot of the people, and I'm enjoying the
Are you
experience.
down to an 80-hour work week or something like that now?
I wish. I unfortunately have never quite picked those jobs that allow me this whole work-life balance I've read in books. But for me, it works, and I just love a challenge wherever I can find it. And the fact that I can still help improve government contracting outcomes for taxpayers and agencies is a lot of fun.
So don't misunderstand my question, but there are some in the audience, I think, who would think that the process of reverse auctioneering is the exact opposite of what the government really is looking for. It tends to have a downward pressure on prices. It makes contractors more cutthroat, more thirsty, more hungry. The price always goes down. It never goes up, I assume. So what's your reaction to that?
Well, I'm glad you asked about that, because I do think that there's some myth busting that needs to be done around reverse auctions. First of all, Jim, I think reverse auctions are good for maybe 15% of the government spend. So we always get in these arguments about complex services and building a building and all these types of things. I don't think you should use reverse auctions for those. That's not the best tool. I think for commodity goods and simple services where you can define your technical requirements, or if it's a best value, you can separate the technical evaluation and the price competition, then it makes sense. But if you're talking about 15%, 10%, you're still talking about about $50 billion, and only about $2 billion of reverse auctions happened last year. So I think that the argument gets muddled. I think when I sit down with people who are critics of reverse auctions, I universally agree with 95% of what they're saying. It's got to be used for the right things, in the right way. Contracting officers have the right training. I agree. But there are a whole bunch of things in which I think it's really useful for. That dynamic pricing, what I found as I worked on strategic sourcing with the government is we get tremendous value in strategic sourcing. We do the commodity management of rationalizing what we're buying and the clauses we're using and all of those sorts of things. But spending all the time winnowing the field for upfront pricing isn't that great in the government because the spend is so large anyway, and we're not bringing dollars to the table at that point. If you can do all of the structure of a strategically sourced category, but then use reverse auctions to dynamically bid at the order level, that can be pretty helpful.
You're saying it's a tool, but it has to be used selectively, like any tool.
That is exactly what I would say.
In time remaining, where do you want to take FedBid? What do we expect from Joe Jordan now at FedBid?
Well, I'm always out in the community trying to figure out what pain points agencies are feeling and if there are ways that I can help. In terms of FedBid specifically, I think that we both need to partner with new agencies to help them understand the appropriate use of reverse auctions and how it can be beneficial to them. And then also work with sellers, the folks out there who express the opinion you expressed a little bit earlier, oh, it's all about price, this is in some way detrimental, and help them understand the benefits. We have all sorts of small businesses who get their first ever government contract through FedBid because they can now access the government contracting supply chain in a way that was harder before. We need to tell that story in a better way and build a collaborative, productive dialogue.
That's an ambitious charter. Okay, we're going to step away one final time, and when we come back, we're going to have some final words and a little wrap up.
Working in contract management is a complex job. Creating, executing, managing contracts. It's an ever-changing world, and our members share the same challenges. At the National Contract Management Association, we know this business, gathering the best minds in our field, furthering your career by providing knowledge and training. Together, we've figured it out.
Question for you. Do you lack an overall effective win strategy? Hi, I'm Jim McCarthy, owner of Key Solutions. For over 30 years, KSI has helped clients win or retain over $130 billion in government contracts by providing the keys to winning. Now, if you're chasing a must-win contract, visit AOCKeysolutions.com and click on Contact Us. It's a tough market. Don't go it alone. I'm here with Joe Jordan, the former OFPP Administrator and now President of FedBid. You've been on both sides. You've been in the government, you've been in private industry.
Yeah.
What is the one thing that a contractor should not do, aside from committing a criminal act, what he should not do if he wants to win a contract?
I would say don't lose focus. Don't get dragged down into the pettiness that happens sometimes in our community where all of a sudden it devolves in, that pride in the product or service that you're providing to the government devolves into this I should have won kind of negativity. Keep focused on providing the highest quality good of service at the lowest possible cost to your government customer, understanding what their needs are, and engaging in a positive way. So when they make a decision that you don't agree with, I find it's usually less productive to go in guns blazing in this accusatory manner versus kind of saying, okay, well, this is how I viewed it and why we thought we were in the strongest position, and get a debrief and match up and have a productive dialogue, because that'll set you up for a better position next time.
Yeah, you use the word guns blazing. I was wondering to ask you for some time, does a typical government civil servant view contractors as greedy, out to get every penny they can, the heck with the taxpayers? What was your experience there?
No. I find that the typical federal employee, civil servant, views contractors as a very helpful enabler of their agency's mission, and there isn't an agency I know of that could be 100% successful in delivering their mission without industry partners. But I do think that sometimes, because there is always the one bad apple type of thing, there's fear around, hey, if the government isn't looking at cost than nobody is. I know that's not true, but that's the one thing that
So profit
we've got
is,
some room to make.
Profit is not necessarily a pejorative term then, as far as what the government
No,
thinks. Okay,
no.
got you. Now, okay, give me one thing. If there was only one thing, message that you wanted to leave with our audience, what would it be, Joe?
I would say that, I spent 5 years in contracting policy positions within the administration. Now I've spent the last 6 months on the industry side of the equation, and I'm telling you, I'm as optimistic and positive about where we're headed as a government acquisition community as I've ever been. I think that there will always be disagreements and arguments on the margin, but we are in a really good place, and I can tell you from seeing inside the tent that is a view shared by many.
Okay, well, I like that optimism. Before we wrap up, we've come to the GCW Mailbag portion of the show. This is where we answer some timely questions that our industry often poses. Now, here's my colleague Richard Nathan answering the recurring question about IDIQ contracts, more commonly known as indefinite delivery or indefinite quantity.
Are IDIQ contract vehicles with hundreds of awardees sound procurement policy? This question has become a popular subject of conversation whenever contractors get together. It's a response to the proliferating number of large IDIQ contracts that agencies have and will continue to award. But is it sound policy? It's hard to say. There are so many policy objectives that are in play. For example, the balance between small businesses and large business awards, the ability to speed up the acquisition process, including new players in a market and not blocking them out because they were not awarded a coveted IDIQ contract, and making more efficient use of scarce government acquisition resources. But in the end, the government seems to like IDIQ vehicles and the contractors do not, unless they have one of the coveted awards. But they are probably here to stay, so successful contractors learn how to live with them rather than complain about them. Key Solutions is here to help you win or retain your next contract. If you have a question, you can go to governmentcontractingweekly.com and use the inquiries button to get our attention with a call for help.
In the little more than 1 year since we last had Joe Jordan on our program, a lot has changed in our industry. And many would argue not necessarily for the better. But one thing that has not changed is Joe's tremendous level of passion, his energy, and even his optimism about the future. I want to thank Joe Jordan, the President of Public Sector for FedBid, for joining me.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you. I always enjoy it. But
fun.
most importantly, I'd like to thank you, our viewers, for once again making Government Contracting Weekly a regular part of your learning regimen. Now, on behalf of all my colleagues at Key Solutions, I'm Jim McCarthy. I'll see you next week.
You've been watching Government Contracting Weekly, sponsored each week by AOC Key Solutions Incorporated. Government Contracting Weekly is the only television program devoted exclusively to the competitive and dynamic world of government contracting. For additional information, comments, questions, or suggestions, please write us at governmentcontractingweekly.com.